Kevin is shirtless, I don't know why.
Remember Shrek? Who doesn't, right? The first film was familiar with other films in its genre, but it did some new things to differentiate it. Then the second one comes out and it's just amazing. You're dying to see what comes next. And then there's the third one. Finally, the fourth one tries to get you back on board and succeeds, albeit not at the same level as the first two. You might be thinking to yourself, why is this random British guy talking about Shrek? Well, what I've actually described to you is my feelings towards the Saints Row series. The first two being great and the last two being mid. After such a divisive last few entries, Saints Row, like Shrek, only has one way forward. A reboot. Saints Row managed to play their cards first and release a new outing of the franchise in 2022, and I finally managed to get my hands on it. How was it? Well, let's put it this way. The Saints Row reboot is like if the Shrek reboot was made by Illumination Entertainment. Oh, the horror. Saints Row reboot, or just Saints Row, why do games keep doing this, is a third-person action-adventure game made once again by the folks over at Deep Silver Volition. After Saints Row went from a gritty crime sim into a wacky, over-the-top caricature of its former self, and also the critical and commercial flop of their last game, Agents of Mayhem, the developers tried to reboot their flagship franchise. After a couple of teases hinting at a return to the Saints Row 1 and 2 era, fans were excited to see what was next. Then during Summer Games Fest at Jeff Keighley's house, we got our first look at the game, and it was surely a thing that existed. If you were on the internet when this trailer dropped, then you no doubt saw the negative fan backlash from it. They complained about everything, and rightfully so. The characters didn't look anything remotely like those that came before, the tone was so inconsistent, and the grounded feeling that they were promised was absent. But the icing on the cake was when the devs went to war with their fans on Twitter, with the now infamous haters gonna hate gif pissing a lot of people off. It was a mess, and unfortunately, it was only just the start. Saints Row's combat has a similar feeling to most games in its genre. Boils down to pointing a gun at an enemy and shooting until they're dead. However, the developers do try and introduce a couple of new things. You have these abilities called Flow that you can activate at any time during combat to get an advantage over your enemies. You'll unlock these as you go and can range from simple grenades to throw to over the top and silly ones like Pineapple Express. Whilst the flow system offers a lot of variety with what you can use, they all feel pointless thanks to just how spongy these enemies feel. During my time with the game, I felt that my bullets just weren't doing any damage to them whatsoever. I'd be fighting the same enemy for what felt like a lifetime before finally putting them down. This was extremely frustrating when I realised that enemies are invulnerable during dodge animations. There were times when I should have clearly killed them, but because of the animation, they got a get out of jail free card. This is equally annoying when you are fighting the specialists. They have double the health bars and can do the same dodge animations as a base enemy, meaning double the frustration during combat. I will say though that this can be fixed easily thanks to the game's difficulty settings, but be warned, you'll be in this menu a lot. Perhaps the most frustrating part of the combat is the health system. Instead of a regeneration system or health packs like other games before it, Saints Row's healing system involves the use of takedowns to regenerate health. When in combat, you'll see a circle counting up from 0% to 100%. When that reaches 100, you'll be able to do a special takedown on an enemy to regain health. The system is frustrating for several different reasons. The first is that you only regain a slither of health. you'll gain about 6 sections of health throughout the game, and the takedowns only regenerate one of these sections. No sooner do you regenerate that section, it's then taken away by the enemies who are swarming you. It won't be long until you die after that. The second is a repetition of the animations. You'll be seeing the same one over and over again every time you have to do one of these, and it gets boring quite fast. I can't tell you how many times I saw my character do that twirling headbutt animation. It's cool for the first few times, but then after the 10th and the 20th, not so much. Finally, the takedowns slow the combat down to a halt. You'll be in the groove with it until you realise you're down to your last 2 sections of health. From there, you run around the enemies finding one that you can use the animation on. Certain enemies, like the aforementioned specialists, will need to have their first health bar depleted in order for you to use the takedown on them. This is especially annoying when you have higher notoriety in missions or the open world, as more of these beefier enemies will spawn for you to fight. It's a baffling design choice on the developer's part, and one that I hope future games don't start to adopt. On the vehicle side of things, the driving, I will say, feels nice and smooth to control. You can drift around corners to maintain your speed, and when you're in the air you have full control over your car to make sure you land smoothly. Car combat is also a thing in this game. You can shoot your pistol or SMG out of the window similar to other games, but once again the developers implemented new things. The first is a side swipe a la Sleeping Dogs. You can use this to chase off pursuing vehicles, mostly cops. It's a useful tool to have and can be fun, albeit a bit clunky at times. You can also now, for some reason, ride on the roof of cars and shoot your weapon, and also tow things with a tow cable. I didn't really use these that much outside of missions, but it's nice to know there are more features to play with in the open world. The playgrounds of past Saints Row entries have been filled with an abundance of fun things to do, from pretending to be a cop for a reality show in Saints Row 2, or taking on a horde of goofy mascots in a maze for Professor Genki in Saints Row 3. The franchise has never wanted to stray away from the outlandish and ridiculous. So going into this game, I expected there to be something similar in the vein of the activities that came before. However, unfortunately, this is another disappointment. You have 2 different kinds of activities, side hustles and criminal ventures. The side hustles are quick and easy ways to get some cash through little jobs varied in fun. I'd say my favourite of these were Wingsuit Saboteur and Shoplifting, but the rest of them are just so boring. Riding shotgun just has you on the roof of a car shooting enemies that are chasing you. Pony Express is a drive to a finish line whilst enemies are chasing you, and Apture is just a boring horde mode. It doesn't get any better for the criminal venture side of things either. At your HQ you will have a table where you can build properties on vacant lots. These open up a venture that you can progress by doing missions for the owners. Series staples like Mayhem, Insurance Fraud and Chop Shop all return and are the best ones available. But there are a few new ones introduced. Eureka Beta has you testing new technologies such as a hoverboard and the hilarious Thrustbuster. Cutting Edge tasks you with finding materials in the world for a fashion designer that you can use in the game for your guns and even yourself. However, much like the side hustles, these are not just disappointing, but are also incredibly repetitive. You'll be doing one of the 3 most of the time: shooting a horde of enemies, driving a vehicle to a destination, or taking photos on your phone. That's it. There is no variation or challenge to these at all and feel incredibly outdated by today's standards. After you play these for the 3rd time, the novelty and fun factor quickly dissipates. In fact, now I think about it, the only ones worth giving a go in my opinion are the returning activities. And besides Chop Shop, you only do these a handful of times, whereas the boring ones like Chalupa Cobra, Brighter Future, and KAKTS, the radio one, make you do them up to about 10 times. I've taken the liberty of categorising all of the activities, ventures and side hustles into fun, okay and boring based on my time with them. You can see them on the screen now. When you're not grinding out the activities, you can always grind the collectibles. You can take pictures of landmarks that can be used to decorate the Saints HQ, find weird windmill art pieces in the desert, or collect the 125 drug packets in the world. Fun. There are also various clothing, tattoo and gun stores to visit where you can customise your character's look and weapons. Layered clothing makes a return from Saints Row 2 and allows for a lot of different outfit combinations. It's a nice welcome return and is a lot better than preset outfits. Character customization has greatly improved, allowing even more features for your character than before. You can now add prosthetics and change your teeth type and colour. Perhaps the best part of the customization though is for the weapons and vehicles. You can now change the colour of your weapon as well as add patterns, and for the first time you can customise aircraft and boats to travel the world in style. Speaking of the world, let's talk about it. Santo Ileso is your destination this time, a vibrant, in-your-face city inspired by Las Vegas and Mexico. Whilst the city does have its standout areas from time to time, it mostly just feels barren and empty. NPCs and cars do populate the areas that require them, but they don't feel, sound or look interesting enough for me to interact with them on the streets. There was never an NPC that stood out to me. None of them did any interesting animations that made me stop by murdering and take a breather to enjoy their actions. On top of that, a lot of the interesting landmarks that you want to explore are just simply not available. Some of them being replaced by a really bad JPEG of a room. The best example I can give you is this Aztec temple. When I came across this, I was like, hell yeah, I want to climb that. I made my way over to the steps, ready to climb to the top and see what was inside. And then I was met by an invisible wall. Brilliant. But do you want to know what was the biggest insult? The nearby mayhem mission puts you in a tank at the top of the stairs. So you're telling me that a tank can get up there, but I can't. So disappointing. Okay, now it's time for the big event, the story. When Saints Row was revealed, the one thing that everyone was unanimous on were the characters. Considering Saints Row's history of being a gangster game with bling, hookers and murder, the characters needed to reflect that, and the older games did that perfectly. Characters like Johnny Gat, Shaundy, Pierce, Dex, Troy, Julius, and of course you, the player or the boss, were just so perfectly done. Characters in the reboot looked the exact opposite, not reflecting the gang culture in the slightest. One of my favourite comments on the trailer is that these characters look like the people that the old Saints would bully, and they're not wrong. But you know what? My optimistic self wanted to believe that these characters would be good, with badass moments and memorable lines to quote. Oh boy, was I wrong. These characters are just borderline insufferable, with some of the worst written dialogue on par with Forspoken.
I just move shit with my freaking mind!
Throughout the story, one character stuck out to me as the most insufferable. The boss. The boss in this game is nothing more than a joke-filled psychopath who never shuts up. They always have a funny one-liner to say, which gets old incredibly fast. Even during serious moments, it still feels like they're about to crack another joke, and then lo and behold, it comes out of their mouth. And this is for all 8 of the boss's voices. Speaking of voices, each one of them just feels off. The voice actors do their best to make the writing seem engaging, but even their delivery falls flat. There's no better example of this than the British female boss voice. No discredit to the voice actor, but it feels like she belongs in a completely different game. The voice sounds a lot more soft and serious in terms of her delivery. It doesn't reflect the tone of the scene or even the game well.
And I'd hate to be the idols right now. Everyone at that party is probably gonna get killed.
Sucks to be Kevin Eli.
Yeah.
Oh
We
shit!
gotta go.
Oh my god, no, Kevin!
As for the other Saints, you have Nina, Kevin, and Eli. Nina was the only one of these four main characters I didn't mind. She's tough, talented behind the wheel, and above all, loyal to the Saints. She also has one of the few dramatic scenes in the game, which even though it comes out of nowhere, helps to give her some sort of depth. Too bad that's ruined when she says or does something stupid. Eli is the brains of the organisation. You can tell that by his bow tie. At first, I didn't mind him, and thought that he would be the brains to the boss's brawn, perhaps some back and forth banter. But then he started talking.
Ooh, can we take a hybrid?
Eli, I love that you're worried about fuel efficiency, but I'm thinking acceleration will matter more.
Your carbon footprint always.
Kevin is shirtless. I don't know why. Finally, there is Snickerdoodle. Yes, that's its name. The cat that looks like the thing nightmares are made of. Then there are the gangs, the Idols, Los Panteros, and Marshall. Each one of these gangs has an interesting look to them. The Idols have a post-apocalyptic Mad Max look. Los Panteros are like a Mexican Fast and Furious gang. And Marshall is a military contractor which has a future soldier design. The problem with these gangs is that much like the main characters, there is no development as to who they are or what makes them tick. How did Marshall come to be? Why are Los Panteros so infatuated with cars? Why do the Idols want to tear down capitalism? None of this is ever explained to you during the campaign. Furthermore, the gang leaders are underutilized and once again have no development. Who is Sergio? Who are the Collective? Who is Atticus Marshall? You never build a connection or understanding as to who these guys are and what makes them. And as a result, the journey to take them down is underwhelming. I just have to have a separate section for this part, because my experience with this game has been less than smooth. When this game came back out in August 2022, players noticed an abundance of bugs and glitches, some of them hilarious and some of them game breaking. I thought that with the time since release, these would have been fixed by now, and whilst I didn't encounter any game breaking bugs, I thought I'd share a few of mine. So here we go. At one point, my character held all of their weapons backwards and I couldn't shoot any of them. A gun disappeared and my character was holding nothing, but I could still shoot. I jumped in between train cars and it launched me into the air. The map froze when I went to put a waypoint down. I had to close the map and open it back up. That happened to me a number of times. My character was stood up through the roof whilst driving a car. My character's voice randomly changed for no reason. My jacket would sometimes despawn. The colours of my outfit and weapons would occasionally revert to default. After completing an activity, I was stuck on a loading screen and had to reload the entire game. My character faced through the roof and then back into the car. Then my character opened the car door twice to get in, once from the left and then the right. When I arrived at a checkpoint, my character opened the car door and laid down on the floor in the ride on the roof animation. I could move around but I couldn't get up off the floor and I had to restart from the checkpoint. Those last three all happened in the same mission. So yeah, a lot of glitches, and some of these have been in the game since launch. However, I will give the game credit and say that it does run well. I had absolutely no crashes during the 40 hours that I played, even though I expected one to come at any point given those glitches. Saints Row 2022, or the Saints Row reboot, whatever you want to call it, feels like a game stuck in the past. Horrible story and characters aside, the game feels outdated with repetitive missions, a lifeless open world, and bland side content. The combat also feels like a chore to do at times. with the spongy enemies you encounter throughout making your experience feel tedious and mundane. I appreciate that Deep Silver Volition wanted to further expand and grow the franchise with new features. However, the design choice for this game just feels strange, and in my opinion doesn't fit Saints Row. I hope this doesn't mean the end for the franchise, as it's one of these that has stuck with me ever since the second installment. But I can't help but feel that this game might be the final nail in the coffin for the series.